G'day guys and gal. The Primarchs are finicky things. For all their power and wisdom, most of them have the maturity of a teenage girl with divorced parents. One by one, half of the Primarchs fell to chaos, giving up their souls to eternal damnation and becoming walking abominations. Shadows of their former selves who are encrusted in a shell of hypocrisy and weakness. Mortarion despised the Warp and Psykers, yet is now a combination of the Grim Reaper and a lamp moth who lives in the Warp. Fulgrim wanted to be the image of perfection in his father's eyes, and now he's a rape snake. Conrad seems like the only traitor that got what he really wanted, that being the loss of his head. When death is the best result for you, you know you picked the wrong team. The list goes on and it becomes a bit of a tragedy, or a meme, when you realise that many of these falls to chaos could have been avoided really easily, through the Emperor either being less of a naive dick, or just less of an asshole. Today we'll look at how the Emperor could have prevented the fall of each of his traitor sons, some being subtle nudges in the right direction and others being years of therapy. The reality is all of them could have been saved. Maybe not Angron, but he should have been aborted. As a treat, we'll also look at what the galaxy would look like if there was no Horus Heresy, as a result of all the Primarchs remaining loyal. Before we get started, I want to say a massive cheers to all my patrons. You guys are why YouTube is now my full-time job. We are the #1 Lorehammer YouTube channel on Patreon, even leaving old mate Arch in our dust. We're rapidly approaching our next goal, which I will actually 100% do, even though I originally made it as a joke. Or we can vote to instead change it to a hentai calendar, totally up to you guys. If you want to support the channel and help us get there, then only $1 a month gives you access to everything, including a boatload of custom Warhammer hentai. Let's get into it. The Primarchs each represented a different mental disability. Angron had anger management, Perturabo had an inferiority complex, Conrad was a psychopath, Fulgrim had OCD, and Guilliman had autism. Well, they all had autism, but Guilliman had super autism. This disability was the leading cause to each traitor's fall, due to how incompetent the super autistic God Emperor of Mankind was at being a therapist. But what if he was good at it? To recap, the traitor Primarchs are Horus, Angron, Mortarion, Perturabo, Conrad Curse, Fulgrim, Magnus, Lorgar, and Alpharius Sasha Magun, who may have also been a loyalist anyway. Also, as funny and lore-friendly as it would be, each method for saving a Primarch will not be kill Erebus. Starting with the arch-traitor Horus. Now, despite being the biggest bad guy and a notorious bold cunt, Horus is probably the easiest to stop from falling to chaos. Sure, he was a little upset that Daddy abandoned the crusade without telling him what he was doing, but no way near upset enough to betray him. It was only when he got stabbed with a chaos-influenced knife and then fed lies and manipulations behind the Emperor's intentions did he actually fall. To prevent Horus from falling, the main thing would just be keeping that rusty shank away from him. Easier said than done though, so to be honest, the backup plan would be the Emperor telling Horus about his secret webway project, and also about the nature of chaos. Horus would lead the crusade with his faith in the Emperor unshaken, and his spirit safeguarded against chaos. With this caution, it's likely he could avoid the knife, and if the knife did get him, Chaos would have a rough time exploiting his doubts, as he wouldn't have any. Yes, this potentially would lead to him dying, but that's better than the alternative. It's also likely that he would actually survive the knife wound, just as Guilliman and the Khan did, as it inflicted more psychic spiritual damage on his body than physical. If his mind was prepared for it, then that would likely mean he could have shrugged it off. Although his lack of hair probably meant that he was doomed to fall to chaos from the start. Remember the magic rule, guys, bold people are evil, unless they're black. The next traitor on this list is also the traitor we wouldn't mind watching die the most, Angron. Now, saving Angron's soul is actually quite easy. It's saving his body that is the issue. See, the nails in Angron's head were not designed for his brain, hence instead of just stimulating aggression like they did with everyone else, they made him feel dead inside and gave him brain cancer, meaning Angron was genuinely dying throughout the Great Crusade. Boo-hoo. Anyway, to stop Angron's fall, the Beagie could have made one simple decision. If he had saved Angron's gladiator army, or at least fought by their side when the world's arsehole overlords came for them, Angron would have been totally loyal to the Emperor. Instead, the Beagie kidnapped Angron and let his people get slaughtered. It would only really take like 100 marines or like one custodian to turn the tide of battle in Angron's favour. See, no matter how bad Angron's brain cancer got, he always loved his gladiator powers to a point when his brain was completely fried, yet he still had enough consciousness to gather the skulls of his brothers and sisters and wear them as necklace in their memory. Angron would continue to be an arsehole, yes, but his honourable side would never forget the Emperor saving his people, hence he would be one of the most loyal of the Primarchs. His rage would be an issue as his brain degraded, but honestly, if the Big E was able to keep him from becoming a demon prince for a little while longer, his cancer would claim him anyway. This next one is easy, just fucking spray the cunt with Kleenex. In seriousness, Mortarion's fall to chaos was kinda dumb. He voted to outlaw Psykers, yet joined the faction that was literally just Psykers. The Big E also did not make a very good impression here either. See, Mortarion was raised by a necromancer who, as you would expect, was an asshole. Mortarion escaped him and made contact with the humans of the world, and he quickly became their leader. One by one, Mortarion killed the necromancer warlords, until only his father remained. Then the Big E arrived and was like, if you can kill your dad, I'll leave, if you can't, you have to be my bitch. Mortarion agreed. He climbed to the very highest tower of the world, however the poison and magic was too much for him and brought him to his knees. His Necro Daddy came forth and taunted Morty, and was just about to kill him, when the Big E arrived and just one-shot the Necro Daddy like he was a bulimic girl in an Indian restaurant. Morty then honoured his bargain and pledged allegiance to the Big E. See, Morty was actually salty about what happened and still felt like his vengeance was denied and his kill stolen, but this makes fuck all sense. The Big E gave him his chance and he couldn't do it, so the Big E did it instead. Stupid. Mortarion would then become super close with Horus during the Great Crusade, and when Horus flipped, Mortarion happily did as well. Especially since Horus was able to convince Morty that the Emperor was just as big as a tyrant sorcerer as his old Necro Daddy. To prevent this fall, the Emperor would instead should have captured Necro Daddy and saved Morty. He then could have allowed Morty to execute his adoptive father once he recovered from his wounds. This would have gotten rid of that grudge that Morty had, while still keeping him alive. Secondly, if Horus never fell, Mortarion would not have fallen either, as he would not have that whisper in his ear. Mortarion was well gone by the time he was in Nurgle's clutches, and they only ended up there because he allowed Typhus to kill the ship's navigators, as well as rushing to Terra. In saying this, however, if the Emperor had better explained and shown Mortarion the warp, and how it could be a blessing and a curse, then Mortarion would have likely been able to spot the chaos within Typhus sooner. Or worst case scenario, Mortarion does still end up in Nurgle's clutches, but he chooses to slowly and agonizingly die from the plague rather than give up his soul and his legion. Next up we have Perturabo. Perty is a good example of yes, we can save him from chaos, but no, we cannot save him from being an asshole. Perty was born with the shitty gift of being able to constantly see the Eye of Terror, something that made him very grim and paranoid as a kid, as well as the fact that he basically knew everything, hence the joy of discovery was taken away from him. The Emperor for once actually made a good impression on a Primarch. He didn't steal his kills or allow his blood brothers to be massacred. It's what happened after the meeting that was the issue. See, no one liked Perty and Perty didn't like anyone, hence the Big E would constantly send him and his legion into the most grueling war zones and vicious sieges. This is because they were best at it, but also because the Big E probably wanted Perty to die. Over the years, Perty got pretty sick of watching his legion suffer massive casualties, as well as being shunned by the other Primarchs. He wanted glory and honour and stories of him, but instead all he got was horrific siege warfare. Hell, even one battle that he was instrumental in winning, the other Primarchs who took part in it didn't mention him by name in the legend that was told of the battle. Seems like old mate just needed a hug. If the Big E wanted to stop him from falling, he should have sent the Iron Warriors on a variety of mission types. Some compliances, some easier battles, some battles closer to home and some battles that got celebrated. Perty wanted to feel like people gave a shit about him when no one actually did. Another issue arose when Perty's home planet Olympia entered open rebellion against him and the Iron Warriors. Perty viciously put the rebellion down and killed millions. Afterwards he felt really bad that his own planet rebelled against him and that he killed so many. Something Horus would exploit when manipulating him to fall to chaos. Once again, without Horus's pushing him, Perty likely would have remained loyal anyway, even if he continued to be a massive dickhead. As lame as it sounds, a good hug is all Perty needed. The fall of Conrad was a pretty obvious one. He was a pretty horrible guy before he turned traitor, and I'm genuinely surprised people didn't see it coming a mile off. Conrad was born on a really shitty planet, and he didn't get much vitamin D. This plus the fact that he had constant visions of the future which were often dark and horrific meant that he was mentally broken by the time the Big E found him. Now there are a few subtle but effective things the Emperor could have done to save Conrad from damnation. Firstly, it was commonplace for the Big E to give a newly discovered Primarch to another Primarch to teach them how to Primarch. Well, Conrad was given to Fulgrim, which was probably the worst matchup ever. Like, I could imagine a pretty funny sitcom with these two as roommates, but come on. You have Mr. Gay Perfectionist over here mentoring some emo goth kid whose brain was decaying like dick cheese left in the sun. The perfect Primarch to mentor Conrad would have been Sanguinius. Sangi was wise and could also see the future. This would mean Sangi would understand Conrad's panic state and could help show him that the future they see was not set in stone. Conrad's issue was that whatever he saw in his visions he thought was inevitable. He would go out of his way to make his visions come true. By having another one like him showing him the opposite, this could fix a lot of his problems. This would also mean that he wouldn't have a violent encounter with Rogel due to Fulgrim being a dumbass. The Big E himself even spoke to Conrad one final time, if you believe it was him and not just Conrad's insanity, telling him that if only he had come to the Emperor when he was called to, he could have healed his fractured mind. Overall, I think Conrad would have split away from the Imperium one way or another. He was already committing plenty of war crimes and had been called to answer judgment before the heresy began. If the Big E had retrieved Conrad earlier and brought him back to Terra to be imprisoned or undergo extensive therapy, then maybe he could have kept him from becoming a traitor and killing himself to prove a point. The most simple and second most tragic fall to chaos was that of Fulgrim. When the Primarchs were scattered across the galaxy, the Eldar meme god Sheogorash swapped the Khan and Fulgrim's landing planets. This caused history to occur very differently than what it was supposed to, so I guess the first way to stop his fall would have been getting the meme god to fuck off for a bit. However, that doesn't guarantee that Fulgrim would have never drawn that fucking Leia blade. Fulgrim was one of the most loyal and graceful of the Primarchs, his fabulousness only outshone by Sanguinius, who was a literal angel. If he never found the demon-possessed sword of the Leia, he 100% would never have fallen to chaos. This is proven by when Fulgrim was cloned. His clone maintained his memories, yet was disgusted by them, and promised to make amends for what his traitor self did. Even with the Leia blade messing with his mind, Fulgrim nearly ended the Horus heresy by blowing up Horus's ship, only not doing so because of the demonic corruption stopping him. Fulgrim knew towards the end that the sword was an issue, but his willpower had been sapped away all the way until he killed Ferrus, and allowed the demon to take control of him. Now the Big E wasn't aware of the sword's existence, however his decision not to tell any of the Primarchs about Chaos meant that Fulgrim did not have the caution he should have when he invaded the Leia. If the Emperor had educated Fulgrim on the dangers of Chaos and how to recognize it, as well as put some anti-Chaos Inquisitor type dudes in each legion, they would have quickly been able to recognize the planet for what it was, and probably just exterminatus the fucking thing. Ignorance in this occasion turned out to be Fulgrim's fall. Even with the Leia blade, Fulgrim had not yet fallen to chaos or become a traitor. He had a number of moments of lucidity, the biggest one being just as he was about to kill his brother Ferrus, in which he saw how fucked chaos was, so maybe he could have disposed of the blade using his own willpower eventually, but this was unlikely. When he fought an avatar of Cain, the avatar tried to break this sword, so if the avatar had succeeded in that, then Fulgrim also probably would have remained loyal. Whilst Horus did get Fulgrim to switch sides, Horus being traitor wasn't actually required for Fulgrim's fall. He would have eventually fallen to chaos anyway, a lot like Arthas did when he took up Frostmourne, and now he probably just lurks in the Eye of Terror snorting lines and fucking nines. If Fulgrim's fall is the second most tragic, then Magnus's is the first. Magnus's thirst for knowledge and arrogant dealings with the Warp eventually led to his destruction. He was loyal to the Emperor all the way until Leman snapped his spine and shattered his soul. Once again, the Big E's wish that no one know the nature of chaos was Magnus's main downfall. See, Magnus was really powerful as a Psyker, hence he explored the Warp and encountered different forms of Titsnitch on various occasions, often making deals with him that would later come back to bite him in the ass. The Emperor was like, "Yo Magnus, that tentacle hentai looking motherfucker is bad news. Stay away from him." And Magnus was like, "But why?" And the Big E was like, "Cause I said so, now go to your room before I spank your ass so hard it makes the rest of you look white." If the Big E had educated Magnus on chaos, as well as his Webway project, Magnus would have done nothing wrong, and not crushed humanity's only hope at beating chaos. Once again, if Horus had not fallen, he would not have given Magnus a reason to break the Emperor's Webway project, but in saying that, Magnus had been getting subtly molested by Titsnitch for quite some time, and it's likely the Squid God would make a move at some point. Ironic that the biggest nerd Primarch is also the one who would require the most education to avoid chaos. Coming to the tail end of the Primarchs, we now have White Bold Cunt number 2, aka Pedo Guy, aka George Pell. We have Lorgar. The funny thing about Lorgar is that he was born on a planet that was subtly corrupted by chaos. He then got rid of the chaos corruption, then he had to bring it back once he turned on the Emperor. Lorgar was the most loyal son by far to begin with, because he was a religious fanatic who saw the Emperor as the one true god. The Emperor, a devout atheist, wasn't a fan of this, and to teach Lorgar a lesson, mind raped his legion, forcing them to kneel to the Ultramarines, and then he blew up their capital city. Now off the bat, if this didn't occur, then Lorgar would have been way less of a traitor, but probably still would have eventually fallen as he needed a god to follow, and once he would discover Chaos via his shitty Marines and how much it wanted him, he probably would have switched sides regardless. As such, the Big E would actually need to take an entirely different approach with Lorgar. The Big E would have to tell Lorgar that he was indeed a god and that these were his sacred traditions. The Big E would then need to convince Lorgar that the teachings of atheism were his religious teachings, and by spreading the imperial truth, he was also spreading the godhood and worship of the Emperor. The Big E would also need to tell Lorgar about how Chaos were a bunch of arsehole demons, and that praising them would mean that you wouldn't be able to kiddle fiddle diddles anymore. And yes, killing Corferon and Erebus would be handy in keeping Lorgar in check. Finally, we have Alpharius Amigon. Yeah, look, let's just cut through the memes today, because I really can't be fucked. Whilst the exact nature and truth behind Alpha Legion's loyalty is confusing, the way that half of them become traitor is not. Alpharius was told by some Xenos that if the Emperor lost, Horus would not be able to manage the galaxy, and humanity would destroy itself, causing a massive disturbance in the warp and either destroying the Chaos Gods or depriving them of their main food source. Alpharius believed the death of Chaos was the Big E's main goal, hence he believed that he was actually serving his father by betraying him. Amigon on the other hand was not a fan of this and began actively sabotaging Alpharius' efforts, hence why the Alpha Legion seem loyalist and traitor. The reality is they are both. Traitors under Alpharius and loyalists under Omega. Anywho, the fall of Alpharius could have been avoided by the Big E communicating with Alpharius better about his goals. Also, the lack of other Primarchs falling probably meant that the Cabal would have not tried to turn the Alpha Legion in the first place. On top of this, the Emperor likely knew of the existence of the Xeno faction called the Cabal, and would have attempted to destroy them during the Great Crusade, meaning that even if the Horus Heresy occurred, there'd be no Xeno faction to convince Alpharius to fall. Fundamentally, the Horus Heresy could have been avoided if the Emperor was more open and honest with his sons about the nature of his work and the nature of chaos. He could have shown them the horrors of chaos before the taint of corruption took them, hence they could have easily seen how yucky it could have gotten. I think if GamesWorks spent a little bit more time showing that the Emperor, despite his foresight, couldn't actually predict how these actions would affect the galaxy, then people would genuinely think the Emperor was less of a shitty, stupid dad. Maybe they could even explain the positive and intelligent side of some of his Emperor's decisions, that at the moment seem ridiculous. Now before we finish off, without the traitor Primarchs there would be no traitor Marines, and no Horus Heresy. What would occur in that case? Well, the Great Crusade was already wrapping up, with only small pockets of world worth taking not yet under Imperial rule. It seemed like the Craftworld Elder and Imperium were coming to a truce, and a number of other Xenos were being able to live peacefully. The massive amount of resources spent on war could be funneled into other things, such as quality of life, hence making the Imperium a way less grimdark reality. The Webway could have been completed and mankind would be able to cut their reliance on the warp off and ascend as a psychic race. Obviously the Chaos Gods would not be too keen on this, hence they would continue to try and exploit the Imperium, but without any Astartes or Primarchs, their attempts would likely fall short. The Emperor did have a habit of killing his warriors once they were no longer needed though, which easily could have happened here, hence potentially triggering a civil war down the track. Overall, the Horus Heresy ruined everything that the Emperor built, and with a few small adjustments he could have avoided the entire thing. And that does us for today guys, a solid look at how each of the traitor Primarchs could have been stopped before they fell to chaos or betrayed the Emperor. If you guys have anything you want to add to this list, then chuck them in the comments below, I read all those bad boys. If you enjoyed the video and want to support the channel, then Patreon is the place to be. Only $1 gives you access to a boatload of Warhammer Hentai and Discord rewards. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.